Gossip is one of those evils which sadly we cannot escape. Its impact is harmful to the one speaking, the one listening, and the one who is the subject of the gossip. In the early stages of the Jewish nation, there was a unique punishment for gossipers called tzaras. Tzaras was a discoloration in one's home or in a garment of clothing or one's actual skin. It could be viewed as a spiritual system to prevent gossip. As Maimonides puts it in the end of chapter 16 of Tzumas Tzaras, if one unfortunately was an excessive gossiper, God would send him a message to stop by causing a discoloration on the walls of his home, thereby causing his entire home to become impure. If he repents, then it would go away. If he was unrepentant and continued, the tzaras would stay and his home would need to be demolished. If this message didn't strike home hard enough and the individual still engaged in this excessive gossip, he would find a discoloration on his clothing, rendering it impure. If he repents, it would go away. If not, then it would remain, and the clothing would need to be burnt. If the person was still hell-bent on continuing with his evil mouth, his skin became discolored, and he would be impure with tzaras, and he needed to be quarantined in isolation for at least 7 days. Hopefully, in isolation, they would realize the pain they are causing others and the discord and disunity they are sowing in the community with their gossip, and thus put an end to it once and for all. At the core of this tzara system is found God's kindness for his people to warn us and discipline us so that we recognize the harm we are causing through our gossip. This idea is beautifully understood from a fascinating verse in this week's Parsha. In Leviticus chapter 14, verse 36, while discussing the laws of tzaras on one's home, the Torah teaches us to clear the house out of all its utensils and furniture before the Kohen comes and renders it impure. For once the house becomes impure, everything inside it does too. But until the Kohen renders it impure, you can still save the furniture and utensils. V'tziva ha-kohen ufinu es abayas. The Kohen shall order that they clear out the house before the Kohen comes to look at the lesion, so that everything in the house should not become unclean. After this, the Kohen shall come to look at the house. What's the reason for this? Lefi shechasa Torah. For God has consideration for the objects and money of the Israelites. Now, what type of utensils are we giving special consideration for so that they don't become impure? If it was upon vessels that require immersion in a mikveh to cleanse them, then instead of having them removed, let him immerse them and they will become clean. And if it was upon food and drink, then instead of removing them, let them become unclean, and he can eat and drink them during his period of impurity. Hence, the Torah has consideration only for earthenware vessels, which cannot be cleansed by immersion in a mikveh, and would thus undergo permanent damage if they become unclean. In Hebrew, this is called klei cheres. This teaches me and you how careful we have to be with our utensils and money. If God has consideration for them, so must we. We have no license to just ruin or waste. But there is a deeper message here as well, and that is for us to take a moment and to reflect on what type of person we are talking about. We are speaking of a gossiper, one with an evil mouth, a person that God finds it necessary to send a supernatural message to stop. It's enough. Control your mouth. And yet, even for such a person, God is sensitive for his or her money and belongings. Not just the expensive ones, but consideration is given even to the earthenware, the cheapest and dirtiest of one's belongings. For God's love and kindness is not dependent on our behavior. It's unconditional. To paraphrase the words of the Talmud, whether they behave or misbehave, they are my children. We must remember this constantly. In God's eyes, we have immeasurable value. Never can one say, I'm a sinner and I have gone too far away from God and religion. No such thing. Even if, God forbid, one does end up very distant and one does misbehave, God is still sensitive to even the least valuable object you own. The soul connection cannot be severed nor completely ignored. No matter where you may roam, just due to the mere fact that you are a Jew, there is a special sensitivity you are graced with from above. If this connection with Hashem is highlighted for a tzaras carrier, how much more so from me and you? I wish you a good Shabbos and a good Chodesh.